Hi there, this is Linda and welcome back to my channel. In today's video, I'm putting together my Project Life spread for January 20th through January 27th, 2026, and I'm working with supplies from my stash. Let's go ahead and dive right in. Okay, so this is the last week before we went on vacation. So it's actually, the dates are a little, it's the 20th through the 27th, but it's not a Monday through Sunday because I was just trying to get it right before vacation, because when I get to vacation, I switch up my dates in Project Life to fit whatever destination we're at. So I will have a different spread for each destination. So this week was a lot of like packing and getting ready. We did have some work done to get the bathroom more situated. So I have some photos from that. And there was a lot of snow and cold. Here's this photo of an icicle on the garage door, which I love. We actually had a little bit of sunshine. Here's this photo of pumpkin. This side actually has these 4x6 photos spots, but I didn't have anything I wanted to print 4x6 this week. So I think I'm just gonna treat them like 3x4 and that's fine. I have this one I printed as a 4x4. Maybe that, we'll see. I didn't print a ton of photos this week. I really didn't have a ton. And I wanted to just do a little bit of stash busting. So I found this set of die cuts in my stash, and these were from a One Little Word mini kit, and they're super cute. And I'm thinking I'm gonna use them to kind of add my journaling and create like the base for my spread. And then I have some pieces left from the January stories by the month. So I might pull those in because this is still January. And then anything else I need, I'll just go from my stash. I also need to finish this. I started it earlier this month. I have a few things. I kind of wasn't good at remembering to save stuff, but I do have a few things. So I'll do that towards the end. First, I think I'm going to put you guys on voiceover and just kind of get this one put together and think through kind of what I want. I don't really have a lot of ideas right here. I do also have this stamp set. I was thinking of maybe using some of these words, so I might do that. You guys have been around, you know, I'm not the best at remembering to use my stamps. I also might use one of these as one of my 4x6 pockets because I do have so many 4x6 pockets. And I think I kind of don't want to use these. I was thinking of using these in my stories album this year because they are repeated in every kit, and I'm not going to use them every month in here. So that's something I'm thinking about doing as a repeated element in that album. There's also these repeated, this page, which I think I might do with that. So I'm not entirely sure yet. This one obviously won't work because this isn't a Monday through Sunday. But yeah, I'll go through these, see what I like, figure out what stories I need to tell, and get this one put together. Okay, so this one actually took me a decent amount of time, and I think it always takes a little bit longer for me to put together a spread when I'm working with my stash rather than a kit. So just something to keep in mind when you are working on your project. So the first thing I'm doing is going through my journals to figure out the stories I need to tell. So at the point when I'm putting this together, it's been about a month since I lived this week, so I don't remember a lot of the details without referencing my notes. I keep track of what happened first in my everyday carry, which was that small planner that you saw, and then I translate those notes into cuter spreads in my Take a Note. And I do have videos sharing flip throughs of how I use those journals. I will link those in the description box below if you're a little bit interested in how I do that. But I just made a note or a list of stories on that sticky note just to remind myself of what stories I wanted to tell in putting together this spread.
Next, I'm looking through cards from the Stories by the Month kit from January. I already used this kit to put together a Project Life spread, so this is just kind of what's left over. I think I've used a few of the pieces in other spots as well, but I just wanted to use a couple of the journaling cards and pull in some of the pieces to complement these speech bubbles. So these speech bubbles have like these cute frames. I kind of feel like they look like jewels on the rounded ones, and I am going to end up turning them just into frames because the speech bubble thing just isn't really for me, but you'll see how I do that in a little bit. First, I went over to my pile of scrap paper, which you can see is kind of getting out of hand, and I'm pulling out black and white and gray patterns because there is so much color in the pieces from the Stories by the Month kit and in these frames that I thought it would look good to bring in some neutrals as backgrounds, and the frames would be able to pop on top of the neutral backgrounds. So that's what I'm going to end up doing to fill in a lot of the gaps in the spread. And you guys, I am so happy with how this spread came out. I hope you guys like it too. So this paper here, I think was from Studio Calico. A lot of these papers are super old, almost all of them. If something's newer, I'll point it out, but usually they're pretty old from my stash. And I'm just trimming down some of the scraps to make them work. So I wanted that black pattern for my title card. I thought it would help make that frame pop there. And then I'm going to use that yellow journaling card from the Stories by the Month kit to tell the story of the work we got done on the house, which was kind of the one big thing that happened this week other than getting ready for vacation. I guess we also had a pretty big snowstorm. But in terms of like stuff we did, we had a guy come to our house that's done some work for us in the past, and he just hung a bunch of stuff and made a lot of progress on our bathroom redo, which was really nice to see. We had to finish it, and we are still finishing it after vacation, but getting those main things done was really nice. So that's going to be the journaling on that yellow journal card. On the right-hand side, I also pulled over that 4x6 journal card that says "Here for This" from the Stories by the Month kit. I liked putting those two cards on opposite spreads because they both have so much yellow, and I feel like that ties them together. But that "Here for This" is going to be documenting like just generally everything that was going on this week. Underneath the "Here for This," it says "Here for the highs and lows and everything in between. Here for the moments and the memories." And this was a super stressful week because there was so much to do before vacation. So I really went with that theme for that card. I'm trying now to just kind of fill in all the pockets. So at the bottom of the left-hand page, I created a 4x6 card with one of the black and white patterns and added one of my photos on top and then one of the frames. On the left-hand or the right-hand side here, I created a couple additional pockets using the black and white paper. That one that has the red speech bubble on it, that pattern right behind it with all the words, I think was from the Grit Story kit. And I would have used just that one, but it wasn't big enough to fill the entire pocket. So I backed it with some of that black frame paper, which again, I think is from Studio Calico. I pulled over that colorful vellum that says "Here's to Today" from the kit, and I decided I'm going to fill that in on the left-hand side just to bring a little bit more color in and have another filler because I love these speech bubbles, but I don't have that much to write. So I really felt like I needed some filler. Then there was this vellum word phrase in the Stories by the Month kit that says, "Let's go make some memories." And this spread ends with us leaving on vacation. So I decided to make my own filler card using that text, and I will get back to that in a little bit. Now I'm just deciding how to put these things together, and this is when I realized I don't want these to be speech bubbles, so I just cut that little speech bubble piece off. And I have heard in the past from others that they're not necessarily super into the speech bubble shape, and usually you can just cut it off and turn it into a frame. And so it's such a easy way to modify it and make it work for you. I struggled with the placement here because I didn't really want to cover up my mailbox because the mailbox really helped you see how deep the snow was, but there really wasn't another place to put this. Looking at it now, I probably should have shifted the photo to the right-hand side so that the mailbox was sticking out and this went over by the garage, but that's okay. And I added one of those die cut pieces that said Hello January. That was from the Stories by the Month kit. There's still a few of those left, and I ended up putting them into my stash after this video, but hopefully I'll be able to use them pretty soon. My goal is to really try to use a lot of the kits this year rather than move things into my stash, because I'm really trying to reduce my stash rather than grow it. If you watch my Plan With Me videos, you'll see how I'm tracking all of my products this year, and I'm hoping that that will help me really reduce my products. I've been tracking for quite a few years now, and so far I think it has helped, but I still continue to grow my stash. So this year I'm really making that a priority. On this card here, I stamped 13 inches for the amount of snow that we got, and then I just did a little bit of journaling about when that snowstorm hit, which was actually Sunday night into Monday morning, but I accidentally wrote Monday, so I just kind of rephrased it rather than having a mistake, which is totally fine. These chipboard hearts, I think, were also in that One Little Word mini kit that the frames came in, and the colors worked really well, so I pulled them over from my stash to add some of the as just an additional embellishment on some of the cards. When I'm working with products from my stash in Project Life, I tend to kind of pull things out and then use them more than once, and they become part of like my recipe, I guess, for the spread. So when I pulled over that chipboard heart because I felt like it needed one more thing on that snow card, now those chipboard hearts are part of my recipe, and they are something I'm going to pull from in working on the rest of the spread. I pulled out the Today word from that stamp set, and that was the Stamps Are Awesome stamp for the most recent release. And I haven't yet had a chance to play with the frame portion of it, which I think is really what sets that stamp set apart and makes it more unique. But the words that are included on it are very universal and great jumping off points for journaling. And I do end up using a few of them on this spread, which I'm super happy with. This card here, I created my own journal card using one of those frames, and then adding the stamping just made it a little bit more complete. I also used a rolling date stamp to add the date on there, and that journaling card tells the story about leaving on vacation. So this spread goes through January 27th, and January 27th was actually our first travel day. So we went to Southeast Asia, and that is an 18-hour flight and a 13-hour time difference. So it takes more than a day to get there because of the time change. On the way back, it takes like only a few hours because the time change back the other direction. Even though in reality it takes more. But because of the time change, because we lost so much time on the way there, we didn't really ever get a January 28th. So I included most of the travel on the next spread, which I said includes January 28th, but this one included the day that we drove to the airport and got on our flight because it left at 10 p.m. So everything we did earlier in the day, which also included that sunny journaling photo. So that's why I wanted it to be part of this spread, because most of the day was not traveling. I decided to make my own filler card here, and I'm super happy with how this came out. So what I decided to do was trim these words out into strips, and this is something I do a lot with quote cards or sentiment cards. I just like the way it looks. I feel like it gives it more of a personal touch to split them up. And I will put them on cards like this or put it on top of a photo. There are so many things you can do with a strip of words like this when you split it up. However, because it was vellum, it was hard to read on top of this plus paper. So what I did was to use one of my favorite go-to products, which is white washi tape, because it's just so useful in so many ways. And I just added a piece of white washi tape behind each of the words to help them pop from the background. And I think it came out so great. Then I took it over to my sewing machine and just ran some white thread through each of the words. And this was totally unnecessary because the adhesive would have kept it down, but I just wanted a little bit of texture and just to add something else to the card. And I think it made it just super complete. So that white washi tape, I just get that on Amazon, and I will link in the description box below for you the white washi tape that I use in case you are interested in using one yourself. And then what I do for sewing is I just kind of pull the the threads through the back and add them or tape them down just with some Scotch tape. Now I'm going to move on to the here for this card. And for this one, I decided to use the stamp from the stamp set that is numbers. So you can see I'm looking at this stamp set trying to decide what to do. And there's a 1 through 5 one, and it fits perfectly there. So I decided that I wanted to break my stories up into 5 micro stories to put on here. But before I could do that, I had to go look back at my list of stories and see if I actually could break them up into 5 stories. And I decided that it would work. So what I decided to do was stamp the word details sideways and then put the 1 through 5. And then instead of just journaling immediately, which I was originally going to do, I pulled over one of the stamps that says more of the story and just stamped it on each line as just kind of a jumping off point for each of my stories. So like I said earlier in the video, these were my stories just generally about the week and what was happening. So the first one was just about how busy I was at work wrapping things up to be on vacation. I work for the government, so I have a lot of vacation time, which is really nice, but I do have a ton of work and a lot of responsibility in my job. So when I go on vacation, I always have to work more hours before and after vacation to kind of keep up with all of my responsibilities. So this was me kind of just journaling about how I had some really long days leading up to vacation and how that was extra stressful because there's always the stress of vacation, but just prepping at work was a lot. I also journaled about all of the content prep. I have toyed with the idea of taking a break from YouTube or Instagram while I go on vacation because it is so much work to prep all my content in advance. If you guys have been around for a while, you know that I post 2 to 3 videos a week. And I have done that pretty consistently for a few years now. And I do work full time. And so I have a pretty rigid system that keeps me on top of that. But when I'm going on vacation, I'm losing that time to work on videos and content. So I have to prep a lot in advance. And then when I get back from vacation, I'm always super behind because I don't have that buffer. I usually try to keep a buffer of at least 1 to 2 weeks of content already prepped. So it is a lot of extra work, but I wanted to make it happen this time and I'm happy that I did. So I was journaling just about that, about getting takeout and just all the anxiety and stress of leading up to vacation and finally last minute planning for vacation. On this card here, I didn't really have much else to journal about, but this card had that background about grit from the grit story kit. I think it might have been from like the strong story kit, but it was similar. So I wanted to just talk a little bit about that and finding ways to give myself grace, which is my one little word this year. And this week I was doing that through my daily journaling and yoga. So I just added that on there and put it next to this journaling photo and added that die cut piece on there. I decided to add it vertically because it was just a little too long to add horizontally. I added one of the hearts in the O in the here for this, which I'm really happy with how that came out, and added another one there on that frame and decided to call this side of the spread done. So I'm going to go ahead and slip everything into the pockets and then move over to the left-hand side. Usually when I do Project Life, I tend to work on one side at a time and then kind of finish it up and then move to the other side. When I first started this project, I don't think I did that. I think I just kind of worked on the whole spread overall, but for whatever reason, I have kind of shifted my practice where I do it one side at a time. I used to always slip everything into the pockets at the very end, and I don't know why I've changed it, but I kind of have. So now I'm working on the left-hand side, and I'm starting with my title card. I think I usually do start on the left-hand side because I usually do the title card first, but I think I was just really excited to work on that right-hand side because I had some ideas that I really wanted to execute. So for the title card there, I used that frame, which was my favorite one from the kit. It had those colors on it. I wish there were a few more that looked like that because it was super fun. And I just use my rolling date stamp to add the dates. And then I'm working on putting together the rest of the page. So for that 4x6 pocket, I'm just going to put these two 3x4 cards next to each other. Normally I would just adhere them together with washi tape, but because this one is vellum, it needs something behind it so that you can't see through it to the card behind. So I'm just going to adhere them on some scratch white paper and add that into the pocket. There was a little bit of paper left on the edge, so I'm just going to trim that off and slip that into the pocket. I don't end up adding any embellishments on there. I think because it had that filler card, I just wanted to leave it alone. On this 3x4 card, like I said at the beginning, I am doing some journaling about the work we had done on our house. So we recently got our bathroom redone. And by redone, I just mean decorated. So like the fixtures and everything were not replaced. The cabinets and the counter and all of that was already there. The only thing that we replaced was the mirror. And then we had the walls painted. And so we had the walls painted a few weeks before this, which I documented at that point. But this week we had the mirror hung, and then we had that shelf above the toilet hung, and those hexagon shelves hung. And I was super excited about that. And so I wanted to document that with these photos. And then I also had this screen hung in another room. This is something I inherited from my grandparents. And I don't have a lot in my house that I inherited. My parents are still alive, and so they have a lot of their stuff. But I also live 3,000 miles away from them. So it's not one of those things where we go back and forth, or if we do, we go via plane. So we're not usually bringing things. So there's just not a lot from my parents or my family in my house. And this one has quite a story of how I got it, because my grandparents left it to me when they passed away, and I was not yet in a place where I was fully settled, and I moved across the country, and it was big. One of my best friends from childhood stored it for me for 10 years before shipping it across the country, because at the time, like, it just wasn't in my budget to ship it across the country. So now this screen reminds me not only of my grandparents, but also my friend, and the fact that she stored it for me for so long. So it just has a special place in my heart, and I'm super happy that it's finally up on my wall. I added another one of those Hello January die cut pieces onto that photo of the ice, because that is very much January. And then I'm adding a few more of the hearts before I'm going to go ahead and slip everything into the pocket and call this one done. If you remember earlier this year, if you watched one of my earlier videos, I think it was the first week of the year. No, I think it's the second week of the year. So in the second week of the year, or second spread of the year, I need to stop calling them weeks because I don't follow traditional weeks. But my second spread of the year, I used the Stories by the Month kit from January. And what I've done last year and this year is the week that I do the Stories by the Month kit, I also am creating these ephemera pockets. But because I put it together so early in the year, the month was not yet over, and I didn't have that much ephemera yet from January. So I decided to add a few more pieces this time, now that the month is over, to continue filling in these pockets. However, I don't know why. Maybe it's because I was traveling or because I already put that spread together, but I didn't really save that many extra pieces of ephemera. So I had to dig through a few things to try to find them. I always save ephemera when I go on vacation, but I didn't really want to pull things from my travel to put into here because I am going to document that elsewhere, and I will do a travel album at some point, and a lot of my ephemera is going to go in there. However, I really just didn't have that much. So I went into my pouch from Malaysia, which was our first stop on vacation and also place that we went still in January. In the rest of the destinations were technically in February. And I just pulled a few things out from that pouch that I had like duplicates of and was able to put them in here. So it was like a little flyer that I had already cut out of from one of the craft stores. And there's a business card from the hotel we stayed in. So I'm going to end up putting those in here. And I still have one that will be able to go in my travel album when I get around to putting it together. Here I trimmed down this kind of marketing card that came in my Everyday Explorers order. There's the same one in every single order. And so I have a few of them, and I figured this would be a good place to put it in. And it had pictures on both sides. So it was nice to have it just kind of shine through on both sides. Here I'm trimming down that business card, and I just added a heart on there. And now I just want to add a few things to kind of embellish it. The back is a little bit boring because I didn't have things to put in all the pockets. So I am just adding embellishments and things. I did have this little packaging from my headache medication. So I decided to put that on the back of this card, which was yellow. That was just packaging from my face cream. And I'm just going through and trimming down some of the scraps and things that were on my table to fill in the other pockets. So I'm seeing there's just a couple pockets that are kind of plain on the back. So I added in that scrap of paper, and there's just a couple more that are kind of white, like that one there. This is some packaging from, I guess it's from electrical tape, which this is a total side note, but I like it to be super dark when I sleep. And so when I travel, a lot of times I struggle because hotel rooms often have like weird lights and all sorts of things going on. So I bring a roll of black electrical tape, and then I just use it to cover up all the random lights in the room. And it has been such a lifesaver. And yeah, it's just a huge help for me. And then it's pretty small, but this was the packaging from it because I had to get a new one for this trip. And so I just added that in here as well, and added on another one of those Hello January die cuts. I'm trying to use them up. I think I have one more that I didn't use. And then there's also this die cut that says the year ahead. I believe that's what it says. And I'm just adding it on the back of that purple packaging there just to have something else. And then I decided to flip it over because it was so obvious that the back had all of the like extra things like glued on the back. So just flipping it around helped balance it out. Here's a look at that completed spread. Thank you guys so much for being here. If you have any questions or comments, please leave them down below. And as always, I hope to see you guys all in the next one. Bye.